This month, I continued reading a new favorite author. I read one of my husband's old favorite books, I read one of my favorite books, and I had potentially one of the biggest disappointments of the year. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of November. Let's get right into it with book number 1, and this is Holes by Louis Sachar. This is a very well-beloved middle grade novel that my husband absolutely loved when he was younger, and he'd read it with our son somewhat recently, and this was his pick for me to read in 2025. If you guys don't know, I think I've mentioned this in a couple videos before. At the beginning of the year, he and I choose a book that we want the other person to read before the year is done, and Holes was the one that he picked for me. And I'd seen the movie ages ago with the super baby-faced Shia LaBeouf. I didn't remember a ton about it, but I was excited to read the book because Ben obviously loves it so much. My son really loved it. They had a great time reading it together. And I was honestly in the mood for something really well-written middle grade, if that makes sense. So I picked up Holes, and this was my first read of November, and you guys, this did not disappoint. Oh my goodness, this is such a good middle grade novel. One of the things that I always say about books written for younger audiences is that it shouldn't be dumbed down to the point where they're not learning or getting anything out of what they're reading. I do think that the entertainment factor is super important when you're a young reader because you want them to enjoy it and keep coming back, but I also think it's incredibly important for them to have good books to read. I love introducing my kids to books that I know will be super entertaining, but they are also going to be introducing them to a lot of the elements of good storytelling that they'll be reading into adulthood. This book absolutely did that in spades, or shovels, I should probably say. This is the story of Stanley Yelnats, who is sent off to a kind of out in the middle of the desert reform camp for young criminals, despite the fact that he is actually innocent of the crime that he was convicted of. And out in this desert, he is instructed to dig holes and keep digging holes, one every day, 5 feet down, 5 feet across, and then pick another spot the next day. And what is woven so brilliantly into this story is this curse that has supposedly been on Stanley's family for many, many generations. And we get a little bit of the story of how that happened, how Stanley's ancestor supposedly got this curse, how it's been drifting through the generations since. And Stanley is just kind of in a position where he feels like this is just all happening to him because of his great, however many grandfather's curse. There are multiple stories within this book. There are multiple timelines that we follow, which you'd think could get a little convoluted, especially in a middle grade novel. However, Holes pulls it off absolutely brilliantly. Every chapter introduces a new layer of the story that makes everything happening even more interesting. And even the parts that are predictable are still really fascinating and fun and interesting. So I feel like this is a stellar representation of middle grade literature, and I can definitely understand why my husband loved it so much, why it's been so lauded, why it's been so widely read, and why it's still beloved by so many people today. After Holes, I went back to one of my most anticipated reads of the entire year, which was a reread of one of my favorite fantasy novels of all time. And that is The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. I read this, I think, in 2021, perhaps, for the first time, and just absolutely was head over heels in love with these characters, with Scott Lynch's writing style, and I was really interested this year to see if it was going to live up to the fact that I had put it on my top favorite fantasy novels of all time list, and did it ever. I would actually say I enjoyed this more reading it the second time. I had such an amazing time reading it the first time that the second time I was like, I don't know how this is gonna feel going back to this and you know, knowing everything that's going to happen. What this allowed me to do was to see the way that Lynch foreshadows and the way that he builds subtle things into every chapter that lead us into what might happen next, and gives us a little hint, even though we don't know it, that leads us into the next conflict or the next major event in the story. And I was blown away, realizing now, knowing what's coming, how much of that was in here and how well Lynch incorporates every moment of the story into what happens prior. Like, the whole book is just full of it, and it's so cool when you know what to look for and you realize what he's doing, what he's seeding through the entire story, every single paragraph, chapter, whatever it might be. Mind-blowing. You guys, one of the things that people talk about with this book all the time is the characters. We love the bromance of Locke and Jean. We love the motley crew of the Sanzas and Bug and Locke and Jean and Father Chains, etc., etc. There's so many great characters in this book. But I think one of the things that gets left by the roadside too much when we talk about the Lies of Locke Lamora is the way that Lynch is able to weave everything together, show you what he's weaving without you knowing he's doing it. His prose, his world building. This book has so much in it. It's so well written. It's just so well written. And there are some things about this story structure that I think, can throw some other readers off. I know of some people that kind of struggled with the structure a little bit, especially in the beginning, which I totally understand. And I honestly don't remember enough about that aspect of my first read to know if it threw me off at all back then. But on a reread, I really appreciate what Lynch is doing here and just how well he knows his world and his characters. And this is gritty. This is way more of a grimdark book than people give it credit for. It is dark. There are some really gritty things that happen in this book. But the heart of it, and the fact that we have these characters who, especially with Locke, he's an anti-hero character, right? Like, he's not your noble hero protagonist in a fantasy novel. But what's so cool about that, and why I personally love anti-heroes like Locke, is that he has thresholds. He has a moral compass that says, this is a line I will not cross. And I love that about him. And I think it's one of the cool parts about writing anti-heroes really well, because when they are pushed to the final breaking point, whatever that line is for them, they do often choose the right thing. And that doesn't mean that all anti-hero characters will. Some of them won't, and that can also be a really interesting way to write them. But I think it's one of the reasons why I love Locke so much, is for all of the stuff that he does, for how self-centered he is and egotistical and all of the things. There are those lines that he won't cross, and what happens when he is asked to cross them. I love this book, you guys, and it is absolutely staying on my top fantasy novels of all time list. I am hoping to reread book 2 maybe next year at some point, because I do want to reread the entire trilogy that's out so far. I know a lot of people say they don't want to read unfinished series, and I can respect that. I understand why people don't want to do that. But to me, this is one of those series that, like, even if we never get another book in this series, these books are 150% worth it. Absolutely worth it. And I would even argue that, like, yes, the story continues after book 1, but book 1 on its own is just a phenomenal read. And it does have enough closure that I don't feel like it leaves you unsatisfied at the end. So one of the things I do want to say about this book that I've been talking online about quite a lot, because it drives me nuts, is the new cover for The Lies of Locke Lamora does not, in my opinion, represent this book at all. I hate it. I really hate this cover. And I don't understand why. I don't understand this cover, you guys. It's so... I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I'd be curious to get you guys' perspective on this. I feel like the publisher was looking at current marketing trends and how everything is really heavily skewed toward the kind of romantasy or like softer fantasy covers, or more colorful fantasy covers like that. And they were like, you know what? We need to jump into that. We need to pull those readers in. and they just don't care that it doesn't match the story at all. So anyways, if you've been trying to decide if Lies of Locke Lamora is right for you, please don't ask the current cover. please don't regard this as representative of what's inside the book, because it really is not, in my opinion. Mini rant over. That was my soapbox for the day. I love it. It's still one of my favorite fantasy books of all time, and I loved it even more on the reread. 5 stars, 6 stars, 7 stars, all the stars, all day, every day. I love this book. I love the characters. Are there some things in it that I didn't necessarily need to be in it to enjoy it? Definitely. There always are. But overall, I cannot get enough of this book, and it checks so many boxes for me personally as a reader. I just cannot get enough of it. Next up, I continued with Terry Pratchett's Death Cycle, which is my second series that I've been digging into in his Discworld saga. And this means that I have now read 10 Terry Pratchett books, which is like a quarter of everything he's got out in the Discworld. No, I shouldn't say that. Of the main Discworld novels, I think there's 41 of them. So this is officially my 10th Terry Pratchett book, which feels amazing considering I just started reading him in 2024. We're having a great time. We're still here. Reaper Man is book 2 in the Death Cycle, and I loved Mort. I had a great time with it, gave it 4 stars. I really love the character of Death and the way that Terry Pratchett writes him. He's so delightfully wholesome and gothic. It's great. Now, I was a little disappointed, I won't lie, because I was hoping to love this one as much or more than I loved Mort. And you know, the City Watch series being my standard of like one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, I didn't anticipate loving the Death Cycle that much because I just didn't think that that was possible. And so I wasn't going into this with any kind of expectations that it was going to match the City Watch in terms of how much I loved it, because that series just checks all the boxes for me in so many ways. The thing that bothered me about this book, I think, was, and it's still great, line by line, Terry Pratchett is an absolutely brilliant, no questions asked author. Sometimes the bigger picture I struggle with a little bit more. I did with Mort, I did definitely here in Reaper Man, I have with a couple of the City Watch books. Line by line, his dialogue, the way he writes, the way he structures his sentence, the things he says in them is just brilliant. Sometimes the giant picture of the whole story altogether I struggle with a little bit more, and it was definitely the case here with Reaper Man, because the title would suggest that this is very death-centric, right? I did not find that to be the case, and that was my frustration primarily, because we follow, honestly, more of a group of wizards storyline in this book, in terms of just page time, than we do the death storyline. That made me so sad, because the parts in this book that were death-centric were so good. Oh my gosh. There's a couple of scenes at the end of this book that are some of my favorite I have read in Pratchett so far. Absolute brilliance. However, it was so little of the book overall that it made me really frustrated, because it's not like there wasn't fun things going on in the other storylines. I just didn't care as much. And I was like, I'm here for a death book, y'all. Like, I'm here to watch death, like, learn how to live like a human, because that was brilliant. The wizards and what's going on in the magic system of the Discworld as a result of Death taking a step down from his duties for a while was just not, it felt a little bit all over the place. I didn't care about the characters nearly as much, except for a couple of cameos from characters I know from the City Watch, which was super fun, and I got really excited when they showed up on page for a little bit. But yeah, I felt like the non-death-centric storyline, which was honestly like 3/4 of the book, just took away from the parts that I wanted to read, and I wanted more of them. And based on the title, I was kind of expecting that I was going to get more of that storyline, and the wizards part of it were just going to be sort of in the background, like a side quest, but it wasn't. Death was the side quest, and that really torqued me off. So, still love Terry Pratchett. This was still a fun read, and I am excited to continue on with the Death Cycle and just read Death as a character in whatever capacity I can, because he's awesome. But this one did disappoint me, and that made me kind of sad. So would love to know if you're a Pratchett fan. Let me know down in the comments which Death Cycle book is your favorite and why. Because I've read 2 of them now. I have 3 left to go. And I'm looking forward to continuing those in 2026. But Reaper Man is officially in the books, as they say, and I am thrilled to have now read 10 Terry Pratchett novels. Next up, I actually read an ebook this month, you guys. I can't believe it either. I decided that I was okay spending a little time with my Kindle, which I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but throughout most of the year, I have just been not really feeling ebook reads. I've always liked the physical read way better. I'm not usually an ebook person if I have the option, but I have so many great ebooks that I need to get to that I do really want to read, and so I want to make a little bit of space in the next few months to make sure that I'm getting through some of those. And this was a completely impromptu read because my friend Pete from the channel Ponderings of Pete, you should definitely go check him out in the description below, he let me know, or posted in a Discord, that he was reading The Builders by Daniel Polanski. And this is an indie fantasy book that has been on my TBR for at least 2 years, and I have one specific member of my audience, you know who you are, who has been bugging me to read this for quite a long time. And I knew that this was my sign. This was the sign that it was time. I had a little bit of space in the month left, and so I threw in The Builders by Daniel Polanski. Now, this book is really hard to explain. I'm going to do my best, okay? The way that I would describe this is adult Redwall, grimdark Redwall, meets Ocean's 11 meets a little bit of Weird West, Flintlock kind of fantasy. And I know that sounds like a giant convoluted mess, and weirdly, it works. It's kind of like when you put a bunch of leftovers together and just whatever you have left in the fridge and you're not really sure that it's going to taste good, and then you take your first bite and you're like, you know, actually, that's not half bad. I felt like that with The Builders a lot as I was reading it. It is very interestingly structured. Some of the chapters are only a sentence or a paragraph long, but the way that Polanski uses that structure to his advantage with impact is actually really cool, and I found myself really enjoying that aspect of it. Some of those little paragraphs just punched so well, and they were exactly what I needed in that moment as we're kind of transitioning between 2 other chapters and bigger events. These characters are all woodland animals. So we have the captain, who is this kind of stoic, bent on revenge mouse, who is gathering together a veteran crew of animals that he worked with in the last war that did not end up in their favor. And we have a opossum sharpshooter, we have a mole, we have a stoat, we have an owl, we have just all sorts of woodland creatures that are brought together in a group to kind of go on one last Hail Mary mission to right the wrongs that happened to them at the end of the war that their side lost because of a betrayal. So it is a revenge story, and I loved that aspect of it. I loved the idea of these kind of grimdark adult Redwall animals, because I loved Redwall when I was growing up. One of the things I will say about this that did diminish my enjoyment of it a bit is some of the pacing was a little rough. Some of the plot beats felt a little like, oh, we just need to go here, so we're going to kind of quick throw that in and not spend a lot of time on it when maybe we should have. And also, for me personally, there are some lines that if I'm reading animal characters or animal companions or whatever, there are some lines that I feel like I'm not comfortable crossing in storytelling, and this book definitely pushed right up to those lines and even stepped a toe over a couple of times, and some of it was just ridiculous. Like, there's a lot of past history going on between all the characters that are mentioned in the story, and there's an owl and a snake that were supposedly lovers at one point. No, there's a certain level at which my suspension of disbelief just turns off and is like, what? So there was a lot of that in there. I do think that the concept of this book is really freaking cool. And it's very gunslingy. It's very gather the motley crew and go on a Hail Mary revenge mission. I mean, and the introduction of each of the characters was really fun. So I'm very glad that I read it. Overall, I think it's a really fascinating concept. I do think, though, that he pushed some of the humanization of the animal characters too far for me personally. That definitely took me out of the story more than I wanted it to. But I have now read The Builders by Daniel Polanski, which was super exciting because it's been on my TBR for ages, and it actually felt kind of nice to read an ebook again. So I definitely think I'll be picking out another one hopefully in the next month or two to read, because I do have a lot of fantastic books on my Kindle that I need to get to, and this one encouraged me to go back and pick another one of those up. So the last book that I read in November, I literally finished this morning when I'm filming this video, which is not December 1st. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. This was a priority read for me. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting to try this author for at least a year and a half, if not more. And so I was really excited to try this. Unfortunately, it ended up falling pretty flat for me, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm so sad, you guys. I really wanted to love this book more than I did. And all the things I have to say about it, it's kind of complicated. I'm still working on articulating this and why I'm so disappointed in it. And I do think it's a personal thing. I don't think this is a badly written book. I think it's a very well written book for the most part. I didn't really have expectations going into this book. I was spoiled for one aspect of the story that a lot of people say, oh, you need to go in blind, don't know anything. I actually don't feel like what I was spoiled for really changed my experience with the book all that much. And it actually, if anything, kept me reading when I probably would have DNF'd this otherwise. I know that it's very common for people to say, oh, definitely go into this blind, like don't know anything about it. I do know that on the Goodreads tags, this is listed as fiction, science fiction, dystopian kind of story, so I was at least expecting that-ish. I don't know. This is one of the softest dystopian books I think I have ever read, because while the concept in and of itself is incredibly dystopian, I feel like Ishiguro had the concept in mind, and he had this vision of what he wanted the world to look like, but we're not really let into it at all. And me saying that kind of proves some of the story. If you know, you know. Like, a lot of the experiences I had with this book, I don't feel were outside of how the author maybe intended it to be read. I just didn't enjoy it personally. This is more literary fiction, teenagers at a boarding school discovering themselves, than it is any kind of science fiction and dystopian. Most of the dystopian elements of this story are dumped on us in exposition at the very end. And it's not that there weren't some good moments in here. There were some good lines. It just dragged so much for me, and it was so boring. I really felt bored by this, and I didn't want to. I know that there are a lot of thematic things in here that I could dig into, and I know that they're there. I just never felt that engaged with them, and I kind of, the whole time I was reading, I kept thinking, I don't know that I feel like this book has committed to any of the types of story it's trying to be. Is it a romance? Is it literary fiction? Is it sci-fi dystopian? And I don't feel like the book ever really committed to any of those things. The main narrator, this is told in a first-person narrative style, is very distant and detached, which again could be intentional. She's also kind of a wet blanket through most of the book, and it drove me nuts. It drove me absolutely bonkers. And I I just didn't care, and I wanted to so badly because I think the concept of this story is really interesting, and I love dystopian books. But this one I don't feel like committed enough to being a dystopian book. I feel like it kind of like put a painting of dystopian subgenre behind it just so that we could say it was dystopian. I don't know. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in this one. I still want to read some of Ishiguro's other works. I think those might connect with me a little bit better. But I just didn't emotionally engage with this one as much as I wanted to, and I was pretty bummed about it. So that's my official thought on Never Let Me Go. My next read from Ishiguro will probably be The Remains of the Day, because I do own that one and it's on my shelves. And that one I'm actually really looking forward to still. I don't think that this has put me off of reading Ishiguro by any means. I have 3 other books by him that I really want to read, so I definitely will be getting to more of his work. I just think this one specifically did not live up to the anticipation I had for it, which isn't necessarily its fault, but it was just kind of a disappointment. So that's the end of my thoughts on Never Let Me Go. So guys, that is my stack, minus The Builders, because that's an ebook, for November. Now, I had a ton going on this month, and so it felt kind of nice to just go back to an old favorite, to read some shorter reads. I crossed off 3 more off of my priority reads because I wanted to continue with Pratchett. I wanted to read Ishiguro. I wanted to reread Lies of Locke Lamora. I read my husband's pick for me for this year. So overall, it was a very productive month of reading, and I feel like we had some good variety. Unfortunately, only one 5-star that I already knew was going to be a 5-star, but that's okay. I feel really good about the reads from this month. I would love to know down in the comments below what you read in the month of November. What was your favorite book? What are you looking forward to in December? And let me know if you've read any of the books I've mentioned in this video, what you thought of them. If they're on your TBR, let me know. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a fantastic week. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving if you celebrate. And I just wanted to say on that note that I'm really thankful for you guys. You are a phenomenal audience, and I am so grateful to be part of this community and to get to chat with you guys and get to know you all and to talk about something we're all passionate about. So that is very cool to me, and I'm feeling very thankful for that around this season. So anyways, I hope that you are reading some 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.